Vig, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the elevator sessions.
Thank you.
Tell me about your company.
Well, I would like to run a thought experiment first. What if I were to tell you about a new material that is literally hundreds of times stronger than steel, yet light as a feather and as flexible as silk? The same material could be added to electronics to increase its performance by more than 10 times. But it can also be added to solar cells to more than quadruple their performance. We could put it in your body to increase the strength of bones, fix skin. The only problem is it's expensive. Now, what if this thought experiment goes with some scientists at Oak Ridge National Lab discovered a way to make this material almost out of thin air and about as cheap as plastic? My question is, what would that do to the world?
I don't know. How do you think it would change the world?
That's a good question. We're going to find out.
Perfect.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. My name is Vig Sherrill, and I'm President and CEO of General Graphene. And I'm going to talk today about a substance that's been recently discovered, and I'm going to talk about graphene. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about our company, but I'm going to really focus on some of the unique properties of this material, again, called graphene. So you might have heard of it, but it's a relatively new development. It was actually predicted back in the late 1800s. And graphene is made of pure carbon, the same substance that diamond is made of. They thought it should exist in the late 1800s, but they really couldn't figure out how to find it or even how to make it. Well, it wasn't until about 2004 where two British scientists actually discovered this material called graphene. They took Scotch tape and they put it on a piece of graphite, and they pulled it off. And they did this a few times, and they put this under an electron microscope, and they were the first human beings to see this two-dimensional substance called graphene. Remember, this is pure carbon. You can see the picture there a little bit. It kind of looks like atomic chicken wire. I'm going to go over that in a second. Well, these two scientists who discovered this in 2004 actually received a Nobel Prize for this in 2010. So they received a Nobel Prize using a piece of graphite and Scotch tape. Okay, you got to keep that in perspective, and they did that in 6 years. What's even more remarkable is that in the 10-year period since it's been discovered, more than 9,000 US patents have been generated towards the applications of graphene. So really, what is graphene in detail? Well, graphene, as I mentioned, is a lot like atomic chicken wire. And I can say that in East Tennessee because we know what chicken wire is here. So it's pure carbon. It's made of the exact same material as diamond, but it is two-dimensional. Diamond is three-dimensional. We all know what diamonds look like. Well, carbon, this particular form of carbon is completely flat. It is one atom thick. That's impossibly thin. And we've also heard that diamonds are forever. Well, what's really interesting is that eventually diamonds decay into graphene. Now, as an aside, I told my wife that I was going to give her some graphene for our anniversary instead of diamonds, and well, that didn't go over like I wanted. This is a picture of what graphene looks like. You can actually see this with your eye. Remember, one atom thick. I'm going to talk a detail about why this is so important, but you can actually see this material. If I made a hammock out of graphene, it would come pretty close to supporting your weight. And this is impossibly thin. If I took and stacked sheets of graphene, I put 1 million sheets of graphene, one on top of the other, it would end up being about as thick as saran wrap, but it would hold 1 million psi. In its native form, it's more than 200 times the strength of steel. I mean, these are just remarkable properties with this. It is so conductive. It's the most conductive substance we've ever discovered. In fact, if you took a single thread of graphene, it would have the same conductive ability as a thick copper cable, about as thick as your finger. Now, I'm going to diverge just a little bit here. What do you see when you see this picture? You see a place you'd like to be, drink a beer, be on the beach. Well, we see something a little different at General Graphene. And I'm going to tell you a little story here. I'm going to diverge from my script because the material that we're using, while it was discovered elsewhere, it's really not been usable to the real world outside of laboratories. Well, at Oak Ridge National Lab, every year they award a scientist or two with enough money that they can go research a topic that they're really interested in because they're so talented. This one individual, his passion was desalination. So he's a big Russian fella, and he wants to go study this desalination. He wants to go buy graphene. Well, you can't buy graphene. It's not even available on the open market. So what does any good scientist do? You can't buy it. You go in your laboratory and make it. Now, he takes this graphene, he starts desalinating, and the other scientists come up to him and ask him, where did you get your graphene? And he's this big Russian guy, and he says, oh, I just go in the back, I make it. And they look at him and says, you can't do that. You can't make graphene. Nobody's really been able to do that. He says, what do you mean? I make this graphene sheet. It works. So to make a long story short on that, he inadvertently developed a way to mass produce graphene when he was trying to use it for desalination. What's even more remarkable about this, his results, he was able to desalinate water with 1,000 times less energy. If you don't know anything else about graphene, that's the one thing you take home and you think to yourself, that's world-changing. What happens if you can now take the entire Pacific Ocean and make as much fresh water as you want to? So the picture you saw earlier of the beach, General Graphene, we see some cool, clear, fresh water with that. Just a recent experiment with graphene, this fella in the Netherlands, he took seeds, ordinary seeds, and he coated some with graphene particulate. He then took a whole bunch of these seeds and he threw them in literally a toxic waste dump with a lot of heavy metals, a lot of various toxins, and the only seeds that sprouted were ones coated with graphene. Now this was amazing, but nobody really understood why. They looked at this under an electron microscope, and what they found out was the graphene had the ability to block the heavy metals. It had the ability to block the toxins and pretty much just let water through. Well, the seeds sprouted with that, and they were basically fine when nothing else would even sprout. Okay, so we know graphene is this just amazingly remarkable material. Well, is it ready for prime time? And the reality, it's really not ready for prime time. You can go online and you can see all kinds of advertisements, you know, make your fortune in graphene, it's going to happen. Well, it will happen, there is no question, but graphene suffers from this one little problem, this one itsy-bitsy little problem. And that is that while it's actually fairly straightforward to make in the laboratory, nobody's really been able to figure out how to make it for mass production. And I say no one's been able to figure it out except the scientists at Oak Ridge National Lab, and until now. So General Graphene, a little bit about our company. We are self-financed. We've been in business a little over a year. And yes, we have a lot of intellectual property. We have several patents. Most of them are from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory we work very closely with. We also have licenses from the University of Texas. And I'll also tell you that there are 9,000 patents existing with graphene. The vast majority are on the usage of graphene, not the manufacturing of it. Every laboratory, every significant laboratory in the world is working on this substance because it is going to change everything about the way we live, because this will provide new material strengths that have never been possible. So we do have intellectual property, but we also have a world-class management team. And I say that because my partners are truly world-class. We have the ability to take this material, go into full production. And I say that in all fairness because we have done this before. This is not our first rodeo. We've done this actually several times and literally brought hundreds of millions of dollars into this area through manufacturing and sales. We also have something that's really amazing right in our backyard. We have Oak Ridge National Laboratory. There are more PhDs per square mile than in Oak Ridge than any place in the US. Now, somebody in Sandia may argue with that, but the reality is there is a huge think tank sitting right there with tremendous amounts of talent, tremendous amounts of intellectual property that we get to leverage off of. That is fantastic. And the fourth part of anything that you want to get into the public is manufacturing. And we have the ability to manufacture. Very few places have this ability, but we do. We have the world-class manufacturing available to us in Oak Ridge. The last part of my presentation is we are seeking funding. We do have several $1 million committed by industrial partners. These are very large multinational, multi-billion-dollar customers. In fact, one of the largest electronics company in the world is coming to visit us very shortly, and we are in negotiations for funding moving forward. We are looking for funding, and we'd like to take some of that local. And if you have any questions, please talk to me afterwards as I'm having a beer. So thank you very much.